Let's be honest. I'll start. How many times have I had conversations with FI users in my life where I've wanted to share a problem in my life with them and get some advice from them? How many times have I walked away from the conversation thinking they were selfish because they didn't listen to me when I tried to share and open up to them? How many times did I share my problem only for them to immediately start talking about a similar situation in their lives or how it would make them feel? How many times did that happen to me? And then I walked away thinking, they're not listening to me. They don't want to hear my problems. All they want to do is talk about themselves. They don't want to help me. They're selfish. Have you ever had these thoughts after talking to FI users in your life? Have you had similar thoughts? Now, just to be clear before I go any further, selfishness is something which is not type related. In other words, there is no one type that is inherently selfish. We hear FE users in particular say that FI is selfish, so we assume certain types are selfish, and we level the accusation that they are selfish, when there is no type that is selfish. Selfish is a character trait. It's not related to type. Anyone can be selfish. It doesn't matter what type you are. Types exist on paper. People exist in person. Selfishness is a human characteristic, so it must be embodied in an actual person. So saying that, I'm not talking about a selfish person out there. I'm talking about people in your life who are close to you or who mean something to you, who you have relationships with. So here's how the scenario goes. You go to the FI user in your life and you open up about something. You want to talk about it. You want to be heard. You want to be listened to. You don't get very far before they get the gist of what you're saying. And then, all of a sudden, they start talking about themselves. And they will reference a situation in their lives which is very similar to yours. So, they start by listening to what you say, and then they start talking about themselves. I've come to realize that the way I used to perceive it, in other words, when I would say, they're not listening to me, they don't want to help me, I've come to realize that that was wrong and clearly a misunderstanding of the FI and loved ones in my life. I've come to realize that when I tell my problems to an FI user, they are actually trying to help me. I was too impatient, too naive, and too ignorant in a sense to understand how they were trying to help. In other words, I didn't recognize what their help looked like. And I think that's the problem. They were trying to help me, but I didn't see it as being helpful because it was a process, a way of thinking, a way of feeling that I don't relate to because I am an FE user. So for me, it didn't look like help. It didn't feel like love. It didn't feel like caring. It felt like selfishness because that's not how I would handle other people who come to me with a problem and want me to listen. And this is where we get into trouble as people. We assume that others operate like us when in fact some do not. So when we make these assumptions, that's when we come to erroneous conclusions. And then we find ourselves in confrontations and arguments and unsatisfactory relationships because we are misreading the other person and how they work, how they function. So the way I used to see this and FI users in my life was wrong. I've come to understand, and in fact, ironically, I've come to understand this through picking the brains of the FI loved ones in my life and asking them about their process and trying to understand them. I've come to realize that their process is not selfish at all. This is how they are trying to help me. And I just didn't see it or recognize it before. When I go to an FI user loved one in my life and tell them I want to talk to them about something, I realize now that they must introspect on their own feelings in order to truly put themselves in my shoes. So I have to be patient with their process, because the first thing they're going to do is think about themselves, think about their feelings, consider my situation, and imagine themselves in my situation. What would they do if they were me? What would they do if this were happening to them? Or they may think back to a situation in the past when maybe they did experience such a thing. What did they do? How did they feel? Remember, FI users are also extroverted thinking users, so they will immediately begin to TE their FI. So they will start thinking about their feelings. And they have to do this in order to empathize with me. When they have completed this process, they can actually say to me, I understand, because I have imagined what it could be like or is like to be going through what you're going through, and now I can attempt to give you advice or help you in some way because I have processed it internally through my introverted feeling and I can understand. Now I can offer you help. And I think as INFJs, we don't even allow them to get to that point because we immediately shut the door and think, they're being selfish, they aren't listening to me, when in fact they are listening. And they are trying to give the very best advice and help they can. But they must honor their process to do it, just like we honor our process when trying to help others. So that's one way I think the INFJ misunderstands FI. And probably, I would say other FE users out there have the same or similar struggles with FI users. So I guess, if I can give you any advice, it would be to look at the FI users in your life differently. When you share problems with them, see their process, try to understand their process, recognize they are trying to help you, that they want to help you. Recognize this is how they show love towards you, by putting themselves in your position so they can give the most loving guidance and help to you they are able to give.